Hello, I'm Stephanie Ruff.
And I'm Aviva Nebeski.
We're the hosts of the Dressage Today podcast, where you can find us talking about anything and everything dressage related. Our conversations span the world of dressage, from leading riders to local level dressage heroes. We're talking training advice, showing tips, and sharing stories to inspire your own dressage journey. So tune in, then tack up. Welcome to the Dressage Today podcast, sponsored by Horseware. This month's podcast is going to be a little bit different. In August, I interviewed Robert Dover to get his perspective on the Tokyo Olympics for Practical Horseman magazine. And the interview contained so many wonderful stories, and our space in the magazine was limited. So unfortunately, a lot of it got left out. And because of that, we decided to put the rest of it together for this podcast, as it almost coincides with the release of his book, which is called The Gates to Brilliance: How a Gay, Jewish, Middle-Class Kid Who Loved Horses Found Success. It is currently available to pre-order and is scheduled to be available on November 9th.
So exciting. So I live here in Maryland, and Robert Dover grew up across the bridge in Northern Virginia.
Yeah.
And as I was starting to learn about dressage as an adult, I met some people who actually went through Pony Club with Robert.
Yeah.
And knew him as a kid, learning to ride. And what they have all said to me that I think is just so amazing was that all you had to do was watch Robert for a couple of minutes and you could see that he was truly gifted.
Yeah.
That there was something so special about him that set him apart from everybody else in Pony Club, everybody else who was riding at that time. So he's a pretty remarkable man. I mean, 6 Olympics.
Yep. That's a lot.
So I'm excited to read his book.
Yeah, well, it was fun chatting with him, and he did have a lot of different things to say. And like you said, he grew up, and actually with me growing up in Pennsylvania, also close by. And one of the funnest things, and you'll hear in the interview, but one of the best things for me was that he knew my mentor, Colonel Alfred Kitts. He knew him pretty well. And so it was really fun for me to hear some stories that he shared about Colonel Kitts, and, a different, not necessarily a different side to him, but just some stories about him that I hadn't heard about. So that was pretty special to me. And I definitely enjoyed that part of the conversation. But it's a big, long interview. And it could have been longer because there is so much to cover when you've
I'm sure
been in this game for as long as he has. So yeah, but one thing I do want to let our listeners know is that the sound is not the best. I recorded the phone interview with him so that I had it for the magazine article. It wasn't necessarily intended to be on a podcast, but there were so many, like I said, there were so many good stories and so much good information that we wanted to share it. So we're including it here but it's a little bit different than our normal podcast interview. So it will sound slightly different, but hopefully everybody will still enjoy it and get something out of it.
And absolutely worth listening to, despite the quality or lack thereof of the actual sound recording.
Definitely. But before we get to that, we have a special Ask the L question today. And because full disclosure, today's question comes from me.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask this to you, Aviva, and let you answer for everyone, or to everyone. What advice would you give someone thinking about going through the USDF's L education program?
Well, full disclosure from my end also is that I did get a copy of this question yesterday, so I had some time to think about it. It's not going to be an entirely off-the-cuff answer. But this is something that I could probably talk about for hours, and I'm sure our listeners don't want to listen to it for hours. So the first thing that I'm going to say is, if you want to do it, you should do it. The L program is probably the single best thing I ever did for myself as a rider, as a competitor, as someone who's just involved in the dressage scene. I decided to go through the L program because I was always last. And I had a nice horse, and I didn't understand why, with a nice horse, I was always last. And I thought maybe the L program would help me understand what judges were looking for. And the L program has changed and evolved over the decades. So it's a little bit different now, I think, than it was when I went through it. But at the time, there was an A, a B, and a C session. And each one of them focused on something individual. One of them focused on biomechanics. One of them focused on gaits. One of them just focused on, how to judge and, lots of other stuff. And I went through the A session, and I was you're allowed to audit the A, B, and C. So there were probably 50 people in the room, and there were about 14 of us who were technically in the program. And so we were allowed to ask questions. Nobody else was allowed to. And it was an introduction to judging. And I was the only one in the group who hadn't ridden FEI, who had never judged a schooling show, and who wasn't an instructor. And by the end of the weekend, I decided that I needed to quit because I didn't belong there. But I'd already spent a lot of money. And so I decided I would go back for the B session. And I'm so glad that I did, because that was a little bit more of the nuts and bolts and a little bit less about what we knew. It was more about teaching us what we needed to know. So I went through the B session and I went through the C session. And the D1 is when you actually sit with an examiner and you judge. And at the time we had to judge 10 rides at training 4. This tells you how long ago it was. Training 4, right. First 4, and second 4. And we sat at a licensed competition, and we had to keep up with the judge who was actually in the ring, judging. And our instructor would ask us questions. And at the end of it all, she took all of our written test sheets home with her and evaluated how we had judged and whether we meshed with the placings of the instructor as well as the placings of the judge who was judging the show. And we got a score. And at the time, 65% was passing, 70% was passing with distinction. And the passing with distinction means that you're eligible to move on to the small R. And I got my exam back, and it was a 62%. And I was devastated. And so I contacted the instructor who was, she still is, Mary L. Barnett, who is one of the nicest people in the dressage world. And I said to her, should I drop out? This is really important to me, and I want to pass with distinction, and I want to be a good judge, and I want to give back to the program. And I didn't pass. And she said, you need to keep going. You just need experience judging. So I found I had not been actually admitted into the final part of the program. And I ended up flying out to the Midwest and doing another D1 session in Wisconsin. And it was really interesting because my original session had been in New Jersey. So I knew people. And in Wisconsin, I didn't know anybody. And I didn't know the names of the big shots. So it was a different way of looking, when somebody like Heather Mason comes down center line, you have a preconceived idea of the skill level.
Right.
I had no idea who anybody in Wisconsin was. So I didn't know who the pros were, who the amateurs were. It was a completely blank slate. It was a fabulous experience. And I ended up going through that D1 and getting a 72%. So I felt much better. And then I went to the D2, which is the same thing again, except even more intense. And the person who does your D2 is also going to be doing your final exam along with somebody else. And I was very fortunate that I had Debbie Real Rodriguez from out in Oregon, and she was amazing and wonderful. And again, I did well. I had a 75%. So I felt pretty good, but still scared about going to the final. And the final was at Lamplight. And how cool is that? I
Yeah.
got to judge at lamplight, even
Nice.
though nobody knew I was doing it, I knew I was doing it.
Right.
And I was so excited because the second person who was my instructor and my examiner was Marielle Barnett. So I got to go full
Wow.
circle
Yeah.
and have my final exam with Marielle and Debbie. And it was a marvelous experience. It's so incredibly intimidating and scary. I went through, as I said, I went through the first program here on the East Coast and then the second half of the program in the Midwest. And I got to know a lot of people, and I started out with people who were FEI riders and had years of experience teaching and maybe a little bit of arrogance that they knew everything. And as we went through the program, the thing that struck me the most was that this is a completely different skill set, and that you can be one of the most incredible riders in the world, but that doesn't make you a good judge.
Right.
It's a different skill. There are many skills involved in this whole thing. One is being a good rider, and that could be riding, trained horses. And then there's the skill of being able to train horses. And then there's the skill of being able to train riders. And then there's the skill of judging.
Right.
And they are all interconnected, but they are all different. And I went for my final exam, and I am very proud to say that I passed with a score of 83%. And I've been going ever since, and it's been wonderful. And what it has taught me is humility. It's taught me how to sit at sea and feel for the person who's riding down my center line. It has taught me the importance of what I call the connective tissue of the test. Before I went through the L program, I learned tests: A down center line, X halt salute, track right, make a circle. And I started to learn how to think about, how do you ride down center line? Where is the half halt before you make that turn at C? How do you set up and balance your horse through the corner? Where does the circle actually start if the circle starts at E? Does it start 10 meters beyond the letter, or do you start coming off the rail right at E? And how big is a 20-meter circle? And how big is a 15-meter circle? And how big is a 10-meter circle? So all of those things, I now ride differently, I teach differently, and that's all thanks to the L program. I went through the program with some people who discovered that they didn't enjoy judging. And that's also good to know. Some people just don't like it. It's really hard. You're always either cold or hot, or the wind is blowing, or you're in an uncomfortable chair, or it's raining, or the sun is shining in your eyes,
right,
or there are bugs. It's physically uncomfortable. It's really hard to concentrate, particularly for L grads who see, hours and hours of intro level.
Yeah.
And to keep that enthusiasm and excitement for 4 hours of people doing walk trot.
Yeah.
Because every single person who comes down your center line deserves the same excitement and enthusiasm. You don't get to be tired.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So I learned a respect for judges that I didn't have before. And you hear lots of people, they come out of the ring and they get their score and they say, that judge is an idiot. She doesn't know what she's looking at. And you know what? Yeah, they do. In order to be a judge, you've had to have training, and you've had to be educated, and stuff. And dressage is a subjective sport. And so you can look at something and I can look at something and we might see things that are a little bit different, but the chances are we're going to give pretty much the same score. Right. We're going to place the class pretty much the same way. What this has done for me is it's taught me some of my biases. There are certain breeds that I like better than other breeds. There are certain colored horses that I like better than other colored horses. And learning how to leave that behind.
Yeah.
And see the harmony of a ride is just I think the L program is something that even if you don't have your scores to actually go through the program, to sit through the A, B, and C session to audit that and to learn about how much is involved in judging intro A, I think is something that everyone who competes should do. So that's my short answer to your question.
Okay. Well, I very much appreciate your candor and advice. I ask the question because they are going to be doing the portions A, B, and C in Ocala the beginning of next year, which is an hour away from me. So
You should do it.
It would be relatively easy for me to go and do it and come back because I wouldn't have the travel expenses. I would have to take time off, that kind of thing, but I wouldn't have to, like you said, fly to the Midwest or even go to travel to New Jersey. It's I could come home at night. So I saw that and I was pondering it because it's, as you said, it's intimidating and and all of that. So
it's intense and it's hard,
right,
and it's challenging and it's time consuming and it's expensive, and the education is so valuable,
right,
that I think, again, if you don't want to actually apply to be in the program and to go through the entire L and get your certification, just to sit through the A, B, and C and to just listen at the feet of these instructors who are amazing. They're almost all S judges. They've been there, they've done that, they know their stuff. They're articulate, they're excited about being a part of the program. The people who teach in the L program want to be teaching in the L program. They want to be there. They want to share their knowledge. They want to train new judges to come up and replace them. It's not just about sitting there in their judge's chair and lecturing to a bunch of peons. They're there to build our sport.
right.
And it's fabulous. It's absolutely worth it I think for everybody, and especially for those people who have any desire whatsoever to show. I think it just gives you such a different perspective on how to come down center line. I stopped being last all the time.
So there you go.
I can't say I was first, but I wasn't always last. And I do attribute a good bit of that to understanding what I need to do in the ring now that I didn't understand before I went through the program.
Right.
It's sort of like, the first time I rode in a FIXA test, and I rode 15-meter circles in training level test 1, and the judge said to me, did you ride 15-meter circles because you thought you get a better score because you made it harder? And my answer, of course, I didn't say yes, but inside I was saying, well, yeah, I did. Well, now I know, having been through the program, that no, you don't get bonus points for making things more difficult.
Right.
You do what you need to show accuracy. You need to show that you can support your horse with the degree of flexion on a 20-meter circle, and that you can start where it needs to start and end where it needs to stop. And not ride a square and not ride an oval, but a true circle. And boy, circles are hard.
Yes, they are. It's why we practice them so much.
Yes. And I know that in a couple of other podcasts, we've talked about, what do I think is so important? And, one of the things that I learned through the L program is accuracy.
Right.
The other thing that I say for those people who want to go through the L program is that it does force you. You are required to do a certain number of hours of scribing and a certain number of hours of sitting. And I still go and scribe regularly with judges. It's part of my continuing education, but I learn so much by sitting with another judge and looking at it through their eyes, and seeing what, kind of saying to myself, okay, well, my comment would be, and my score would be, and wow, this, as judge next to me just said the same thing. Cool. I know what I'm doing.
Right.
So, if nothing else, it forces you to sit with people, and it forces you to scribe. and you learn things by osmosis, and you start to understand, things like people who get tests back and all there are quote negative comments, and the score is a 7 and it's a negative comment, and they say,
Right.
I don't understand this. All the judge hated me, but I got a 70%. Well, no, the judge didn't hate you. The judge was saying, you know what, if you had done this better, it would have been an 8.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And while we're encouraged to give a positive comment and a negative comment, or something that needs to be improved comment, sometimes you don't have time. So if you do a shoulder in and you get a 7 and the comment is needs more bend, it doesn't mean that your shoulder in didn't have bend. It means
Right.
that with more bend, it would have been an 8.
Right. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
don't know about you, Steph, but I'd rather get an 8.
I would much rather get an 8. I'd get 8s all day long.
Yeah, that's an 80. And I would love an 80. So, it's those kinds of things that I think people learn through the L program. And, I can say it until I'm blue in the face to my students and, to my scribes and to my show organizers and all the rest of that. But when you go through the program, I think it really comes alive in different ways.
Yeah.
And it makes you better.
Well, and that's part of what I'm looking to do anyway. So we'll have to, maybe I'll follow up on this in case this ends up becoming a journey of mine, and we can go through the L program together.
I would love that. And just be aware that it's hard.
I have no doubt of that. Absolutely no doubt whatsoever that no, I would not go into that thinking, oh, this will be nothing. This will be a piece of cake. No.
Well, it's funny, up here in my area, we have many graduates of the L program.
Yeah.
And we have many licensed judges as well.
Yeah.
And I know that when I first started in dressage and I found out I was writing for, an L grad, it was sort of like, oh, they're only an L grad. And then I went through the program and I was like, wow, this is pretty hard. This isn't only an L grad, this is an L grad.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it also just teaches an appreciation for, the time and the financial and the commitment to going through this program is, it's a big deal.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, I appreciate your advice, and I will take it.
And I hope our listeners, if they have the opportunity to go through the program, will take it as well. It's, as I said, it's the single best thing I did for myself as a writer, a competitor, and an instructor. I can't say enough good things about it. And it was not easy.
Yeah.
And I wanted to quit several times, but I was lucky that people supported me and I went through it and graduated with distinction. So yay.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if anybody else out there besides me has a question about showing or judging, please email me at sruff@equinenetwork.com or reach out to us on Dressage Today's social media. And after this short break, we will have my interview with Robert Dover. Treat your horse to something new. Horseware Ireland is excited to release its autumn-winter collection. This season introduces new innovations, including our strongest fabric ever, new weight options, and complementary colorways across the Rambo, Rhino, and Amigo turnout and stable lines. In cold weather, you can feel confident knowing your horse is warm, happy, and protected in his Horseware Ireland blanket. Shop for new arrivals by visiting shop.horseware.com. Robert Dover was born in Chicago, began riding at age 13, and started to specialize in dressage at 19. He then went on to be part of Olympic dressage for decades. He was on 6 Olympic teams, winning 4 bronze medals in 1992, 96, 2000, and 2004. He also served as technical advisor for the Duda Corp U.S. dressage team from 2013 to 2018, helping the team to a bronze medal at the 2016 Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro. He currently resides in Wellington, Florida. What were some of your own personal favorite moments from your Olympics, or the horses? that
In
you rode?
1984, my very first Olympics, probably the thing that is most indelible in my mind, other than the actual competition itself,
Yeah.
was marching from the one stadium to the main stadium for the opening ceremonies, and having all the Americans marching down the streets, and on each side of the street there were people like 12 wide just cheering, going USA. And we were all so stoked and excited, the American team of 560 athletes, and we were chanting along with them. And then we went running into the stadium, and we were wild and crazy, and that was something that we repeated in 88 in Seoul, Korea, and then got in a lot of trouble for because everybody else, all the other countries, were marching in proper file, very correctly, and then Americans came in crazier than they could possibly be, and then we got told that will never happen again, and it never did happen again.
Oops.
Never happened again. Not that. So, yeah, I would say that. I think I'll never forget Muhammad Ali in the Olympics being the person that lit the fire,
right?
The cauldron. That was an amazing thing to be there with him.
Yeah.
Oh, there's so many things. Shaking the hands of presidents and their wives and the first ladies, either right before the competition began, like in LA, or afterwards, after, especially if we had a medal. And just all of those things. I have in my book where I was in the line for the cafeteria line with the coach of our team in 1984, and he sort of motioned for me to turn around. I turned around, and I was looking directly into the navel of another athlete, who then, when I looked up, she was well over 7 feet tall. And then I was so mesmerized, I didn't know what to say. And then she was so nice. She was back then it was Yugoslavia, and she was the forward from the Yugoslavian volleyball team.
Wow.
You just think, where would a 7-foot woman be were it not for these sports and the Olympics? Just amazing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that, and then of course our first medal, 1992, back on a medal podium for America for the first time since 1976, and then from that point forward, we medaled for the next 3 games after that. So through my last game in 2004, we medaled every single time.
Yeah, that's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, I guess my other greatest memory would be the last games with Kennedy, because my parents were there and they're still alive.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud to not only have personal bests at the Olympics for myself, but also to just be able to share it with my folks and my family.
Right. Yeah. Of the horses that you rode, is there one that stands out more than the others, or is it you can't pick your favorite child?
Yeah, they're sort of, it's more like in every single games, and it wasn't just Olympics, because I would have a different one. I only had one horse that went to 2 consecutive competitions, which was my own Vader Light, that I brought up from 3 years old. After that, it was clients' horses and people who said, this isn't working for me, do you want to give it a go? And then miraculously things would work and I would get onto a team. I think that they're all special for me, and I loved all of them.
Right.
And I'm grateful to the people who allowed me to be able to ride them, and grateful to them for being so wonderful in my life. But I think Kennedy was the most special animal, because he was as smart as a dog and his nickname was Turbo for a really good reason, because the degree touched him, you got exactly that from him. He was so committed to going forward and so committed to be great that you just really had to be his dance partner and let him be great.
Yeah.
I would say probably the horse that, was, Fader was my own since he was 3. And then I took him to the Olympics in '88 and the World Championships. And he was also, of course, one of my fondest partners. He led the entire Western European League in the World Cup that in '87. So that was another one. And they were all great, but I would say probably Kennedy and Fader Light were the two that I would have the fondest memories from.
Right. What are you working on these days, or where's your focus at?
I'm excited that the Gates to Brilliant is about to come out, and it's been pretty much a labor of love over the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful to Martha Cook and to Rebecca, and I don't want to mispronounce her name, but I want to say it's Didier. I don't know how she pronounces it. Do you know her?
No,
Rebecca?
I do not.
Her last name is Didier. They have been so patient and helpful in guiding me through a process that I have never done before. So I had obviously a lot of thoughts. As you can tell, I'm never for a loss of words.
Right.
For words, but to put it all down in a way that I think people will enjoy, and I hope that they will learn from. I think that really is something that I did not know was so complicated and difficult, and only because of their help has it turned out to be not only a really fun experience, but also I think the book will speak for itself.
Yeah.
And I hope it will cross over to not only be enjoyed by horse people, but I hope that people across all kinds of walks of life will enjoy it and have the opportunity to maybe learn from it.
Yeah. I read what Martha had sent, and it sounds really good. I will definitely give it a read.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, it's what it really is a book of reflections and suggestions.
Right.
Mostly coming from the mistakes that I made. And then I put them out there so that it might be possible for people to read those rather than live through the exact same mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think that it goes with the name. So the name is really because my mentor, Colonel Youngquist, when I was a kid, and I was having so many problems with the horses and figuring out everything. And I walked in and I was lamenting the fact that all these things were going on. And he said, Robert, the gates to brilliance are surrounded by a cloud of sweat and tears, which is just an amazing statement, right?
Yeah.
And it's one that I've never forgotten.
Right.
And really with such great respect for him, and with such fond memories of him, I wanted to name the book that in his memory.
Yeah. Just on a kind of really personal aside, did you know Colonel Alfred Kitts by any chance?
Very well.
Oh, he was my mentor.
Such a great, fantastic, funny, smart guy. And I spent really during his last year of his life, I was with him several times, and I remember, when he died, just being shocked.
Yeah.
But when you're young and these people that are in your life, at that same time, when Colonel Kitts was judging me all the time, was also Colonel Donald Thackeray, Captain Fritz, General Burton, all of these great cavalry guys.
Right.
Major Decine, Major Szilagyi. I don't know if you know any of those names, but because they go back to when I was in my teens and early 20s. These are the men that helped mold the way I competed.
Right.
And of course, Colonel Youngquist, my entire philosophy of the way I deal with horses still today, and with people.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just wondering because
he was a great guy. Alfred Getz, just a great guy, and really so fun because he had always a great word for you at the end.
Yeah.
It was very very military and honorable.
Yep, very much so. So that's cool. Anyway, that was completely an aside.
So cool that you knew him. That's great.
Yeah, no, I spent a lot of time on his farm with him and his wife both. They were my second set of parents.
Wow, you're lucky. That's great.
No, I am very lucky. And and then the last question pretty much I had for you is that you still seem to be very enthusiastic about dressage in the sport. And so how have you kept up that level of enthusiasm all this time?
I guess the first thing is I just love horses, and I always have, and I always will. And the other part of it is I love the people. We are a dysfunctional family at times, but no matter what, we are still a family. We dressage riders, not just the American community, but the world community of dressage riders. We are maybe from the view of outside and from others, a crazy, wacky group, but we most definitely are passionately in love with our horses, with the sport and the ideals of the sport. And though we do sometimes tend to get so self-critical within the sport that we maybe don't do it a great service at times, we definitely, when we are held up at gunpoint by those from outside of our sport, we will band together as a group and defend our sport and how we care for our horses and how we love them to the end. Yeah, I'm still passionate about the sport. I'm not so passionate that, as I said to you at the beginning, that I would get up at 4 in the morning and sit there through the entire thing.
I hear you.
I do have another life outside of dressage that makes me also very happy.
I hear you.
But when I'm there at the barn, which is most days, and I start teaching or training or riding, something clicks inside of me, and it's not like I choose to be passionate in that moment or to give 100% of myself. It's just, again, mechanical. It's something clicks in me, and I have no choice but to give 100% every single minute of every day to whatever the horse or the athlete needs.
Yeah. That's all I have for you. Is there anything else you'd like to share that in particular?
Oh, like I said, I'm excited for the book to come out, and I'm excited to see what happens because of it. Yeah. I also am very hopeful that this coming season in Florida will be a fun and exciting season of the sport, and I just hope that we all get our acts together and get everybody vaccinated, and that people understand that getting vaccinated is not giving up their liberty, but only really being patriotic citizens to care for others. That's what I'm hopeful for, and we'll just see how the next months and years play out, right?
Yeah, that's about all we can do at this point.
Right, now we got to just do our own best, the best that we can each day, right?
Yep, but I certainly appreciate you taking all of your time and taking time out for us.
Thanks so much. It was fun talking to you, okay?
Thanks. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye-bye. Many thanks to Robert Dover for talking to me for both the Practical Horseman article and this podcast. And also, please check out our sponsor, Horseware Ireland, at shop.horseware.com. Thanks for listening to the Dressage Today podcast. If you've missed any episodes or to subscribe, go to Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. While you're there, please rate and review the show. Learn more and read in-depth training articles at dressagetoday.com, or you can visit our subscription video site, ondemand.dressagetoday.com. Be sure to give us a follow on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. Happy riding, and we'll see you at X. The Dressage Today podcast is a production of the Equine Podcast Network, an entity of Equine Network, LLC.